Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Are we live? Yeah. The title of tonight's episode is an important one. It is something that was made clear to me in regards to cognition today. Um, Life is a journey, not a story. And that's an incredible, important differentiation to make. To discriminate between what appears to be temporary and what appears to continue. I have this view. How would I say it? Matsuo Basho, this Japanese Zen master, says the journey itself is my home. Today I was looking at life and I was wondering, okay, what are we missing? What has humanity not noticed about the structure of life? And I realized it's changing much more than we think. It's as if the moment we're occupied by a thought, there's so many other changes occurring. And eventually I was like, what is the meaning of life? There's certain scholars have kind of seen the world and the creatures in on this rock to be a sort of coagulation of various patterns of genetic expression. It's as if nature is doing its own thing. Then, in the middle of this, mankind has become aware to even give it definitions or define it in a certain way. What I mean by that is that our sense of knowledge and knowing is sculpted out of the experience of the moment. And so, what the moment really is this concept I've created. I call it experience tunneling. When a person becomes really conscious of how not only their physical body moves throughout the day, but how their subjective reality manifests. It's not just you doing a new action, there's a inner significance or implication that comes from that action. The whole concept of karma was how the attention of the being was defining their destiny. What I'm trying to get to is this realization that I feel the civilization will tilt. It will tilt into a direction where people will realize we are journeying through moments in our waking state rather than being a certain set of definitions. Let me tell you why objective reality is not enough for the true speculation or consideration of what is actually here as the moment. The creature will evolve referentially until it attains a certain speed of movement where those references cannot be held on to. Pretty much the meaning of the world has to do with how things are changing for you. If they change too quick, your free will feel out of control. If they change slowly, you will feel you have control. Kind of like the king in the kingdom. It doesn't matter, kind of like when he makes the decision. Whenever he makes the decision, it's as if everybody's waiting. Do you see? So the reality is adjusting to the speed of that creature's mind. Now, what various genetic patterns of the human species has led to certain originations of thought. Literally, people are extracting senses of self out of the world they can see. Now, when you walk in downtown Toronto, it's not a you can't be really proud on those streets. Let me tell you why. Because it's like the defeated and the successful walk on the same road. And so it's like when you see a human being who's been defeated by the forces of nature, has been pushed, like literally you as a human being, your actions are either taking you back inside the cave, you're devolving, or you're like actually evolving. Now, it's I don't know how to say this, but like being a character in a story is a very vulnerable position. If you think you're a certain somebody right now, certain mischief may come and manipulate you because you are convinced by the character. Seldom this is said, but it's not that the universe has certain specific laws. It's that every person is specifically in their own way interpreting the laws of the universe. Some people walk in downtown Toronto in those streets and they're shouting and talking to themselves. And it's chaotic to watch. And there's some people who are just super quiet and ignorant. Even if there was somebody dying in the street in front of them, they would not see it. Their headphones would be put into their ear, kind of blocking them off the responsibility of their greater self, which is their collective. Responsibility is the purpose of life, strangely. That means the meaning of life amplifies to your ability to respond to things. We have evolved into a free will. Now, what I mean by this is that there is an advantage. It's like every disadvantage there is an advantage to it, and every advantage has a disadvantage. The generals of war, people like Sun Tzu, acknowledge this. They kind of always thought that victory belongs to those who have seen the balance of heaven and earth first. Literally, they're tapped into the moment's movement. And then their mind is no longer a prisoner of their past. The future has invited them in, causally speaking. Life will not be important to the person that exists in one dimension only. Because you will literally, it's kind of like a person not wanting to see the reality of things. It's as if you want to enter the greatest palaces, but you have not seen the worst wastelands. And so the mind, if you pay attention to it, it oscillates between chaos and order. This oscillation between chaos and order is so crucial because it means that there can never be ultimate happiness and there can never be ultimate suffering. It's as if in the yang there's a bit of the yin, in the yin there's a bit of the yang. What that means is like in any moment of consideration of any sort of self. If I choose to have an objective self, the world will be subjectively unknown. If I choose to be a subjective self, the world will objectively be unknown. This is a sort of state of consciousness in the mystical, kind of in the Vedic yogis acknowledged, even in the Buddhist tradition. You see, these guys didn't just sit down. When they sat down, their inner realities shifted and they noticed it and they wrote some stuff. I am not the first seer of thought. There has been so many human beings. It's as if I got this revelation recently that it's as if I, in my mind, of course, anything you have put an incredible effort in will have some value to you. But then it was as if in my moment I've had sometimes my mind playfully shout at me, and I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. What I mean by that is literally I've had moments where I've just been waiting, literally no thought, it's just waiting, you know. And in that moment there has arrived a certain perception. It's as if it's very fascinating. Your mind is like this unique antenna. How you move it changes how you receive. And so that shout was a sort of vision. You see, it's like people think only speech is through language. That's the unfortunate thing. People think language is the only way you can communicate. They don't know how to communicate through stillness. They don't know how to speak the language of silence and stillness, the language of their presence. Because that dialogue is very different. That dialogue has to do with your psychological, how you're constructing the world in accordance to an individual psyche, which eventually comes down to a character in a story hovering in the middle of nowhere. That is the most profound thing about knowledge. You know, knowledge devours many people, you know, and not in a good way. It pretty much, it's like they know a little, immediately they solidify. Kind of, there was this Zen story. This guy's meditating on this grassland, and suddenly he gets this profound enlightenment, revelation of some sort about the true nature of phenomena in his moment. Now, what happens is an entity in a dark minion. This is a Zen story. A dark minion in another dimension is like, whoa, this man's kind of seeing the truth this, out of the illusion we've put in front of him. And so the dark minion runs to the Dark Lord, runs to those in charge of mischief. And he says, this man has understood a truth about the world. What do we do? And the Dark Lords looked at the minion and they said, don't worry about it. And the dark minion's like, why? And the guy said, and the Dark Lord said, because he will make a belief out of it. He will again engage himself in linguistic truth in a world where change is the ultimate teacher. You learn from your experiences more than you have ever learned from people. That's the truth to me. Now, your relationship with yourself, I think the modern Western man has an incredibly unique and sophisticated, fragmented psyche. This is why I kind of noticed the ancient yogis were going towards stillness and silence. And then I realized it's like on one level, human beings are going to the extremes of like the lack of activity, and they're on another level, they're going to the extremes of activity. So it's as if I asked myself, if these yogis got enlightened in caves being super quiet, why not the opposite be true? And I realized the opposite is true. This is why I say advanced communication is a path to clarity, but it's not a path. It's a path that is, it's kind of like you gotta, as Greek mythology recommends, it's like you gotta be careful, like Icarus, you know? You have to see the limits of internal manifestation. You will come to contentment. Objectivity will move, and the mind is so sophisticated it can simulate many versions of itself. I realized this the moment when I was younger. I had this closet, you know, and this closet would, its doors would open from the inside, and its doors were complete mirrors. So there would be a moment where there would be two mirrors like faced to one another, and I would go in between as a young kid, and I would experience what appeared to me as like an empty infinity, as an optical illusion of an infinite reflection. It proved well, but at the same time it was hollow. It was like a hollow dream. An optical illusion is like a dream in reality, you know? Now, when I went there between those two mirrors, I realized the mind could consider parallel existences of itself, you know? And so the self reflective aspect of intelligence is very crucial because it means where are the definitions of the world coming from? On some level, I understand religious people are like, so they're running after revelation to comprehend it or abide by it. But at the same time, it's in a linguistic realm. Language is being defined by everybody. You look at ink on a piece of paper and it has meaning to you in accordance to your intelligence. So it's as if objective phenomena really doesn't have much to say. It's man's mind that is here, that is roaring in various ways. So for me, there is a way out of suffering, but it's hilarious. It's not a way. It's literally stopping what doesn't work in your life and watching what happens and realizing how new thoughts come. It's like the person no longer needs to be able to just adjust to an external environment to survive. The person also needs to adjust to an internal environment that is even moving much faster than the external. The thoughts come and go much quicker than matter actually changes. Like scientists say, every 2 weeks the cells of your body change. Not all of it, like your brain, it takes a couple of years. But like cells of your body are changing. The body is constantly replacing itself. And so, what is keeping the body is in form? Of course, I can't deny the unknown. That's why it's as if like I tell the New Age community to slow down, but at the same time, I don't deny the presence of intelligence in the unknown. You think intelligent phenomena exists in the known bubble of man's consciousness, okay? But beyond that bubble, we think there's no intelligence. The laws of the universe, gravity is a sign that there's more intelligence in the world. There are forces. And it's very fascinating because language, ladies and gentlemen, was invented on Earth. It's a technology. It's a technology so ingrained with our, in some sense, consciousness, where it's as if what is keeping the particle in the field as a separate person is, believe it or not, language. Your mind is made of language right now, especially if you believe something. And beliefs are ridiculous. They're like leaves. They change every season. It's as if you have a belief, it's like you're trying to put the whole world in one box, in one way it has meaning. And who says a changing phenomena has to have the meaning you see in it? You see? So the world is not just cruel externally, it is cruel internally. Do you know? But it's not, it's the character that animates in the moment. So this is where I realized the kind of this take, it's like after a level of mysticism where the person is just being indifferent, is trying to observe what thought is, how intelligence moves, how attention is being phenomena. Then they open up to a sort of intuitive ceremonial practice. If you notice, I'm telling you, if you go to any kind of person in quotation marks considers themselves spiritual and ask them about their intuition, or even for the ancient Greeks, the logos, or Carl to Friedrich Nietzsche, it was like the daemon, I believe, or something, or maybe that was the Plato. But what I'm saying is, like so many people, they're the the logos is instructive. It's programmed. It's just a mysterious program. That's why the person follows it. It's as if kind of like your mind gains a certain ability to interpret every moment. What that means is your mind sees objective phenomena, but at the same time, simultaneously in your subjective realm, there is a sort of geometric or linguistic phenomena also being evoked. You see? And so the whole ceremonial thing was that, like, I went to Rishikesh, India, guys, no joking. We had, like, it was part of this yoga program. And this was in 2016. And I went there, and we had to wake up early in the morning, go around the fire, and it was this Agni prayer, kind of like this yogic, Vedantic kind of approach to life, where you were making prayer to the fire that at its core was a metaphor for time, you know, for how time is burning all of us in some sense. But there's a truth here, as if Plato said time is the moving image of eternity. That sentence is incredibly powerful. It is in some sense a sentence beyond the temporary. So, for example, we did that Agni kind of ceremony, and to be honest, I was like semi awake. It was so early in the morning, and I was just there, and we had to throw like certain kind of seeds into the fire. It was kind of it was interesting. It was an interesting thing. And anyways, so the guy, the yogi who did this evidently every morning, he would just go into this kind of trance-like mantra saying kind of thing. It's as if for a second he became a machine and like was just chanting things in a mechanic, not in a mechanical. It wasn't unauthentic. It was literally the dude was like a machine. His mantras were coming so fast rhythmically that it was like like I don't know how to say it, right? But And so there was a sort of ceremonial thing. And if you look at things, most people are afraid of rituals because they just put everything in a box and they call that box superstition rather than wondering about the underlying psychological implication of the act in the first place. Okay? It's as if it's so easy to time travel in the past and go call someone an idiot. Oh, but what I'm saying is after you have played the games of the objective realm, that's when I think metaphysics will be interesting. Because if physical phenomena is still interesting for you, pursue that interest. You know, it's like the worst thing is a dishonest metaphysical approach. Like it makes no sense. It's like literally why play with clay. You know, there is life. I don't know how to say it. It's as if as we are living externally in society as a social entity, the same time there's a sort of inner life. There is like aside from the objective communication oriented kind of social environment, there is an inner life. It's as if people, the reason people can lie to one another is because they're not being seen in the act. Okay, because in some sense the world is being painted into meaning. This is why people didn't realize. This is why at least I'm proud of educational systems for having debate societies, yeah, in academic circles. Let me tell you why. Because it's kind of like you need that challenge. The mind evolves through challenges, right? And after it even reaches the reward, even when you get to heaven, now let's say you got into heaven, you know, and now what do you do then? Do you just stay in heaven, or will you suddenly pick another fruit and fall from the clouds like the Abrahamic Adam and Eve? You see, it's strange. When I studied certain religious cultures, I realized they're because they believe in monotheistic traditions, because they believe there is a designer to the world, that designer's truth is more valuable than anything. So what that means is the true religious man, it's not that he just doesn't care for things. He doesn't care for anything aside from what the true designer of the world is saying. This is why religion is such a powerful belief system. It's kind of like being shot into space from a cannon. Your ideological self is kind of surrendering. It's as if literally the holy man is letting go of his past and future because it's all in God's hands. What can you do? You know? So the thing is, it's like we consciously evolved something we perhaps don't realize about religions. It's so easy to walk over something that's started from like thousands of years ago. You know, again, the time machine thing. It's so easy to go back in time and see how unevolved things were. But that's not the true test of intelligence. I find that we are thrown into a unique situation. Let me tell you why. Imagine AI in the Ray Kurzweil, this futurist says in the year 2045, perhaps there's going to be something unique happening on this planet where technology will become aware of itself. We will somehow have done it. Okay, when technology becomes aware of itself, it's kind of theoretically suggesting it will grow into its intelligence, which will be everything, right? So it would be a collective mind. And so what we see is the way the AI speaks is doesn't have a body. Its body is every computer in the world, but it speaks through a voice. Individualism comes from a voice. We only seek freedoms, freedom of there's freedom of speech, and freedom of expression. Let me tell you why. Because it's like it's evolution's way of still being a creature. It's as if it's a quantum physicist said this. He said they asked him about like experiments of quantum physics, and you know what he said? He said it's like literally we've taken a cheetah who's built for the natural environment to run on fields, and we've put the cheetah in a cage, and then we're trying to see what the result of the experiments are. It's as if science shouted to the world, I will not believe until I experiment. But then we realize the limitations of the experiment, the limitation of the sophistication of the technology. So, in some sense, everybody is left agnostic because the world goes forward, because change speaks louder than beliefs. I found it hilarious. It's, to be honest, what you realize life is a cyclical pattern. When you understand this, you relax. You relax incredibly, as if like the seasons pass, and now you can see it. Where before you were just trying to hold on to, the blossoms of spring and realizing no, colder times are coming. And there needs to be. I realize without the seasons changing, the biological evolution would not grow. Our minds will not grow. We would not. Our cultural development will not have that much value. And it's all very connected. This was something Leonardo da Vinci said. He said, realize how everything connects to everything else, as if he was shouting the secret of the cosmos to people. Leonardo da Vinci is a guy who would write, who would probably like, let me see, he would write with his right hand and draw with his left hand at the same time. What that meant is as if like he could see enough of a balance between two different brain hemispheres to function. Cultures are changing, and it's nothing is new in some sense. It's as if all our ancestors suffered. How can we complain? How can we talk about stress and depression? It's like holy shit, they had to run to battlefields and get shot, or you know hold swords and defend their villages. Like the person just has an emotional. The thing is, it's all moving upward in a way where it's as if we used to be savage externally, but we're civilized, but our minds are still savage in society. Our minds are like how are still primitive, and it's as if when the body evolves to a sort of very playfully from a solid to a liquid, then to a gas state, which is the collective being, humanity would have, you would feel suddenly the collective heartbeat. What that means is, like, I gotta choose to remain in the first crossroad, guys. But anyways, like, what I'm saying is like there is emptiness is like the unity of everything. When you look at an object, before you learned the names and the noun for that object was just being there without definition, without linguistic or subjective value. It was just a presence. You see, it's like it's so different when you acknowledge yourself as a presence of an attention, and this attention has been conditioned and spoon-fed ideology since its childhood. Because the easy way out was to not care. That's the issue. This is why when a challenge comes, this I find this is the healthiest attitude. It's like everybody's like, why should we go into that? Why should we confront that challenge? And one guy said, why not? And that's it. There was no reason, no imagination, no past, no meaning, no plan. It was just why not? We are existential creatures, yet we cower away in our beliefs, not living our real lives, hoping for a day to come that some sort of savior comes and finds us. You know? It's as if when I've seen in these shows, like reality TV shows, where they show like they suddenly take a lot of money and they give it to a family at a lesser economical class, and the family breaks, actually everybody in the family breaks into tears, right? It's as if it's a divine moment, right? And this is why it's kind of I don't kind of doubt it. The more abundance you get, the more you feel there's a purpose in the cosmos for you to have what you have. It's as if you still hold on to your personality, but it's the issue with wealth is that it when you feel you're too free, you will only see chaos. But when there is chaos, you can see freedom also. Do you see what I mean? If imagine like somebody is I just saw this occur to myself when I was very young. I was like very happy just like for being here, like existentially, right? And then I later on realized as stories entered people's lives, their emotions began defining them. It's as if the moment you choose to be emotional, the intellect is in the passenger seat, kind of like, I hope you drive well. The mind is powerful because it defines the limits of power, because it originates shape or evokes it. And an evocation is a ceremony with the world. It's as if this is what Mr. Within would say to any, like there are 100% people in the world who are doing strange metaphysical practices. And let me tell you something. Whatever it is you're doing, first you have to be in an honest world. You have to find an honest world you can live in. That means every person has a certain level of chaos and order that brings their mind into a preferenceless balance. So at first, you shouldn't seek the unknown. You shouldn't seek power. Because if you seek it out of a reaction to the past, you will become a tyrant. You will just mutate. Your ethical conscience will mutate. It will suddenly become like the mouth of the beast. Imagine the person like he was doing something wrong, instead of the conscience being like, don't do this, man, the inner psychological kind of ethical systems of the person. And so instead of that backup system occurring, imagine instead the conscience was like, you, why haven't you even done it yet? Do it quick, be quick. So you see, it's intentions, and intentions come from characters, and only an able mind cannot. It's as if you don't get defined by the content of the moment. You are the whole moment. What else can you be? What else can you be? It's as if like we are not our thoughts, and at the same time we are not ourselves. The cells of our body are physically changing. You don't have the same body you had 10 years ago. So it's like everything seems to be changing. How is our systems of knowledge so fixed? And it's because we value multidimensional landscapes. Pretty much the educational system and the technology of language made man's mind open to infinity. Because without duality, there can be no infinite consideration. You cannot be immortal unless you're in a world where you can live and die. Do you see? It's as if there's previous structures of thought that must be acknowledged. No structure of thought stands on its own. At most, it's just language hovering in the air. At first, you look at what the eyes of people are seeing, what they're looking at. Then you just look at their eyes, how their eyes move, and eventually you realize their heartbeats, like their whole how their intelligence is kept. I am telling you, you can ask somebody to just say something, and the first words that they speak are painting a conceptual picture that it's automatically revealed what they are, who they are, how their mind is working. I'm trying to find this picture for a story before I tell the story. Yeah, I found it. Nice. Just hang in there, guys. This thing has to load. So, guys, I'm going to tell you this story. Sorry about the wait, I found something. Anyways. So, this story is about Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon has incredible stories about him. Of course, regardless of if we paint him as a good man or a bad man, he achieved a great amount for his lifetime. And his attitude and the stories about him are interesting to kind of study as if you were a kind of historian of the life that you're living, you know? And so the story is Napoleon, he was exiled. He did something smart where he started holding parties in this kind of exiled island he was. And as people came, he got data about the status of the kingdom. Eventually, long story short, he finds himself having the French army and all the Frenchmen of this town kind of on his side, and he's going back to take the kingdom from, I believe, one of the Louis that was a coward, you know? And so what happens is there's a moment where Napoleon finds his Frenchmen are kind of pointing guns at the Frenchmen who are palace guards. And the palace guards, regardless of what king is in behind their doors, they must protect it. It's like that's their only command, you know? And so there's a situation where Napoleon sees his men are pointing guns at other Frenchmen. He pretty much sees he had an incredible patriotic force within him. And in that moment he saw like Frenchmen pointing guns at Frenchmen. And what he does is he tells his men, literally lifts his right hand up and brings it down, and all his men to put their guns away, but the palace guards are still pointing their gun. And Napoleon goes closer to the palace guards, and all of them are pointing their guns at him, at Napoleon, as if like we'll shoot you if you come closer. And so Napoleon suddenly he opens his like coat, like as if showing he's vulnerable, and he says, "Who dares kill their emperor? Who dares kill their emperor? Who dares kill their emperor?" He's roaring it, he's shouting it, as if in his mind he's already the emperor, and who dares kill the emperor, right? And what happens is in that moment, the Frenchmen who are palace guards, they realize this man is 100 times more of an emperor than the one hiding behind these walls, right? So they kind of break down in tears, and they're like, "Our emperor," you know. And it's kind of like a football end of a football game kind of cheers celebration. And so what happens is in that moment, it's like the incredible kind of expression from Napoleon. He chose to, it's as if he was so strong that his vulnerability showed. He showed those soldiers he was fearless. And so, anyways, what I'm saying is that it was like his inner reality was so real to him. It was more real than the external. So the external started taking the shape of his mind's influence. It's as if at first you want to learn from organized data. Of course, we're data processing creatures. We've been kind of conditioned to be data processing creatures, and we choose to process this data sometimes emotionally, sometimes in a very incredibly analyzed way, you know, sometimes in a non-analyzed kind of intuitive way. It's as if everybody has an intelligence. It's just moving differently with different inner authorizations and outer manifestation, right? So all that Mr. Within is kind of pointing to is that, guys, just be sensitive to how experience is existing. Suddenly you will be re-energized. It's as if nothing was healthier than waking up from that which was just. It's like when things don't change. This is how you know. It's like boredom is a symptom of beliefs that have been held too long. Think of it this way: if you, in some sense, had a puppy. I personally don't have pets. You know, I'm not that cruel to enslave an inferior species. No, I'm joking. But I'm saying, like, imagine you had a puppy, you had a creature, like a creature you had to take care of, for example. right? So you would want this creature to have the natural freedom it requires to stay in its healthy kind of mode. Do you see? And so I feel we are, it's like whether we like it or not, we are in the small part of the world. You know, there are forces beyond us. Governing institutions are, of course, they are like the guardians of civilization. You know, it's as if it's very tragic when you see bad politics because it's as if the opportunity was lost. All that time has been become void. You know. But anyways, what I'm saying is you would want to give freedom, and freedom has to do with your interpretation of how the world is. Do you see what I'm saying? Your beliefs are coming from a philosophical context. Your mind has architecture, has sort of structures. This is why writing is crucial. Writing is kind of like you have when you write something and then like a week later come and read it. Literally, it's like you're looking in your mind. You're looking at your mind in the mirror. You know, attention is key. And your attention, it's as if like it's simple. Whoever controls your attention controls your world. Simple as that. If you are a self oriented creature, your attention is centered. It's like independence does not have a cultural context to it. It has an energetic context to it. You know, it's as if regardless of what the candle believes, it's lit. It's like that's the value of life. It's the wilderness of its potential change. You know, it's as if we can't expect much. We're temporary physically, biologically, but it's like at the same time the opportunity of sight for every person has its own personal value. I don't know how to say this, but it's kind of like a round circle, the whole spiritual quest. It's like the person runs after it's first the phase of escapism. All those kind of troubled kind of spiritual seekers out in the world, they're seeking for paradise. Their animalistic instincts has locked them down in a program of despair, so they're trying to escape reality, right? So what happens is it's like the person it wants to be somewhere else, wants to be something else, doesn't want to be just what is here. Okay? How would I say it? Remember this. This is pretty much like what you don't care about leaves you. Your attention holds everything. And it's unknown. Its presence is unknown. Literally, we can't index the whole manifest universe to be certain about any knowledge. We're playing with language as a species, and rather than orchestrating the whole linguistic structure of the global community to something where the ideals, better ideals, have been built. When I say your mind has architecture, because language has a sort of geometrical value. Most people don't see it. Most people, when they hear words, it takes them to an image or maybe a film in their mind, you know? But I don't know how many people hear sound and it has a geometrical subjective value for them. I believe we're in an era of ideal worship. What I mean by that is if we take the concept of idol worship back in the day, the whole kind of Abrahamic religions have are motivated out of this idea where it's as if there was people were worshiping stuff to be truth as the ultimate truth as God. And some dude came and like broke all these idols except one of them put a hammer beside it. You know, I believe this is the story of Abraham. And so he put a hammer beside one of the idols, and all the people came in. He's like, "Yo, Abraham, did you do this?" And there he's like, "No, this god, one idol did it." And they're like, "This guy doesn't have hands. How could he do it?" And it's like suddenly they snapped out. So it's like after the attention was freed from objective phenomena being the only truth, what do you think it leaped to next? It leaped to the worship of language, where that is the 6th century approach of religion. It was a decision made by history. So we are worshiping language, believe it or not. And this is why it's so hard to care for the world, because greed comes out of a sense of self in a multidimensional playground where it can choose values. So it's as if, why should I put my attention here when I could have my attention there? Why should I look at a burning world if I can't do anything about a burning world? So you see, it's as if there's stories of justification deny your greater experience's evolution. Sometimes, trust me, you have to give in to the moment or you will be left alone in your presumptions. You can't, there is no person who can be 100% in one state all the time. Unless that state is a presence of, it's causally, it's from emptiness first. So we assume the space in the space is more intelligent than the matter. The particle is not as intelligent as the field it's in. Certain philosophical concepts, because I tend to perceive them geometrically, you place them upon one another, they get a certain unique design. And what I mean by that, it's like you take linear time and realize it is projected in a sort of non-linear, non-definition space. We don't see the space in the world as intelligent. We say it's the empty space, outer space. But what is space for us? It's just like, just how can I tell you? It's like the fish wondering about like the ocean. It's so in the ocean it can never see outside the ocean. There's this story actually, maybe I could share. A group of incredibly educated fish, younger fish, go to this older fish, this older sage of a fish. Like, I don't know, imagine like cod going to a whale. Right? They go to this kind of older fish and they say, "Older fish, what is God?" To them, God is, of course, the ocean, but they don't know it. And they're like, "What is God?" And the old fish looks at the younger fish and says, "God is not in your words. It's it's everywhere. It's within you. It's your minds. It's the whole universe being here." And the fish are like, "What are you talking about, man?" God has to be a bigger fish that we have to worship. That's what God has to be. God has to have a personality so we can have a relationship with it. It's like, how dare man put language over the unknown? Like what good comes from it? Only explorative value, nothing else. life, when you treat it like a journey, every experience has its own unique value rather than all of them having to constantly lead to a certain outcome. I want to share something out of my kind of, it's very personal, but I want to share it because it applies. And it's the only example I find from it. At first, you are, how would I say it? You are a person with a certain personality, a certain snapshot of an image of a human being, with a certain story, lineage, whatever narrative. You're a kind of subjective, objective creature. Then you begin to see that there are other objective creatures with their subjective frameworks, but at the same time, your subjectivity, it's like, if you notice, it's a relationship of mind with phenomena rather than a body, and the mind is the X factor. It's the unknown factor. It has to be unknown, because if it is known, it will the sense of self will be unnecessary. It's like, it's not that people have a choice if they have an ego or not. It's like literally their intelligence, evolutionary wise, has isolated. It's kind of like, there's this ancient Cherokee saying that says, when the child is born, the child cries and the world kind of celebrates. And then when the child, in some sense, has lived its whole life and is now dying, it's as if when the child, it's like the world cries, the child celebrates. The living being has completed. It's like the journey's peak evolution has occurred due to the attentiveness of it. You gotta learn to wield your attention, kind of like how Thor learned to wield his hammer. The mind is so fascinating. It can, believe it or not, be motivated and inspired to holding certain altered states. Ooh. Let's change. Let me just change the. You choose to be a character. That character will eventually be introduced to a certain level of chaotic phenomena, and it will have to define the chaotic phenomena. And if it defines it too personally, it means it has given phenomena emotional value. What that means is, like, ownership has to do with the emotions of the person on the phenomena. So just like how I look at this candle, it's an object, but my mind puts the thought of it like it's not an object, it's a candle that I bought from the store. So like, when there's that kind of thought, same way you can also put emotion on this. And emotion is like just having various archetypes and certain memories, certain senses of you in the past, all being attached. When you attach too many thoughts on one thing, it becomes meaningful. It's literally just kind of generation of subjective phenomena in the moment. you become attentive to it, and then life suddenly flows. You realize, like, okay, before karma was karma, like, how was the silence present? And I found it hilarious, guys. Then let me tell you, there was something that happened in the, I believe, 1980s. Yeah, in the 1980s, like around the hippie kind of movement, where there was this kind of man from India named Shri Prabhupada who brought started the Hare Krishna movement. Okay, and there were other people too. Like Osho had a show too, and so what happened is Sri Prabhupada brought this kind of ancient religious tradition into Western culture. He just injected those behaviors, and suddenly there was this whole Hare Krishna movement where these hippies who had taken LSD were suddenly becoming monks, sober monks, living for the cause of enlightenment in the spiritual life or something, saying Hare Krishna chants, right? Trying to evoke God's truth and everything, like while it's already being everything. And so what happens is, like, it's Sri Prabhupada, he's actually such a unique being that you can't speak ill of him, even though you can say his ideology or his actions led to some inefficient phenomena. It's like there's a dark side to everything, believe it or not. So what happens is Sri Prabhupada, like for so many years, this Hare Krishna movement's been going on. And one of his disciples, these people who's been just kind of following him, his enlightened instructions and whatnot, right? Eventually, one of them suddenly, playfully, it's like one of these people from like Caucasian or something, and he says to Sri Prabhupada, "Hey, Sri Prabhupada, how long does it take to get enlightened?" Like it was a good question for like the context, the community there, right? It was like pretty much the disciple asking like, how long do we have to do this? And so she Prabhupada stands up like authentically shouting and saying, it takes an instant. It takes an instant to get enlightened, as if somebody finally, one of the disciples has asked a real question, you know? So what happens is Sri Prabhupada says in an instant, and the disciple kind of, he doesn't explain it, but he says in an instant. And you go see other ancient yogis, like for example Kabir. They asked him how long does it take to get enlightened. He said half of an instant. He went even next level than Sri Prabhupada. And so it's an instant because it's self-generated. The whole search is self-generated. Life is more, you find more contentment when you journey through it as a moment, rather than a kind of segmented, like you every day you're harboring various like various modes of yourself living in various ways. And so it's as if, like, let me tell you the power of desire. It works. It's kind of like working in the behind doors with the how can I tell you, like the concept of the future. It's all ideological frames that are just considered more pure. They're just better stories, more relaxed stories, these enlightenment, spiritual kind of attitude. And I don't know how to say it, but it's like Oh, by the way, that picture of Napoleon, I'm going to put it on the screen right now. There we go. That was quick. It's all evocation of the true self, which ultimately can't be a personality. So enlightenment never it leads to an individual outcome. Its whole inspiration is the opposite. You see, like the Zen masters looked at emptiness. The yogis looked at kind of the language, silent language of God's kind of manifested intelligence, right? They all gave a sort of they gave their attention, they attached their attention to one ultimate unknown outcome, because this is the chaotic thing. If you believe in known phenomena, it will change. So how long can you believe in it? But if you believe in unknown phenomena, that unknown phenomena you never know. Do you see? It's like that's the kind of point, like the kind of spiritual angle. It's like the person's like, "Hey man, why do you believe in all that stuff when everything's just here?" And he's like, "Hey man, how do you know?" It's the unknown. All stories are divided between the known and the unknown. All worlds are divided, just like the world is divided between the known and the unknown. As you pay attention to nature, it's like you won't understand just by looking at nature. Literally, go and look at how, for example, bees move, or how certain birds fly. Once I was giving a talk in the UK, and a bird just flew right in front of my face as I was talking, and I was like, I'm definitely bringing this bird into my talk, and I like. So it was one of those things. In that moment, I saw as something came. I zoomed in on a certain phenomena. It became more clear the various patterns that were keeping that phenomena. I did not just see the design of the bird's wings. I saw the factor that it relies on space. It's like the bird is not afraid of space because of its certainty in its wings. So it moves free in that space in some sense, right? So it's as if I'm even looking at human beings. If we had wings, we may not even have the psychological ability to kind of fly all the time. So it's kind of like technology updates. If language is a technology and people have beliefs which are language oriented, so it's kind of like that technology updates too. Some have said a culture evolves as fast as its language does. Some have said the limits of my language are the limits of my world. Some have said the words you speak become the house you live in. Literally, the things you communicate, you're projecting certain subtle frameworks of value into the world. And so for me, intelligence is not about kind of what you carry in your mind, the content you carry in your mind. Intelligence has to do just to alertness to what is happening in the moment. And then once you've acknowledged what's happening, it's like once you've really stabilized your attention in objective phenomena, that means it's like it's kind of hilarious. People who go towards metaphysical ideas, eventually it's an escapism out of the body. So this escapism out of the body is, how would I tell you? It's as if it's as if the person has not even looked at the value of physical life to care for subjective life. You know, imagine a world where people didn't listen. Pretty much, it would be quick extinction. If in internal dimensions of human beings could not be communicated with one another. The moment words leave a person's mouth, it's like in that instant, that language is entering like a satellite into different solar systems, into different ears. The human being is as evolved as it sees the world. And once you really care about your intelligence, you begin to be inspired by like an, how can I say it? It's like you kind of start in a pure, like just present moment, and then you just stay in that state, and life moves. When you start, your intelligence becomes slower and more still than external reality. It becomes observant of it, but when you're moving, you're defining with the movement, so you don't even know you're moving. It's kind of unconscious existence, or semi-conscious existence. It's like the person's biological animalistic kind of evolutionary limits are justifying how its mind projects its next idea of. There's a story from a man named Rumi, and this man is an incredible poet. He's not always painted in the right light, but he is a person who, for his time, contributed incredibly to the realms of language and literature, at least for certain cultures. So Rumi has this story where his mentor, it's like a person who awoke him to the multidimensionality of reality, was a person named Shams Tabrizi. And so Rumi is reading the science book, right? Like back in the day, imagine it's like a rare book. It's like an artifact or something. It's so fragile. So what happens is Rumi's reading the science book, and out of nowhere, this kind of bewildered, like this like kind of, they call them spiritual wild man, like this dervish, this dervish kind of like spiritual man comes out of the forest, and he just goes to Rumi, and Rumi's there reading, and he says, "Hey kid, what are you reading?" And Rumi looks at this guy, and he sees like he's like this old man who's in some sense like just come out of the forest, of course dressed like a dervish, kind of like a mystic. And he says to him, "Nothing you would understand, old man. This is the newest sciences of the time." Literally, he's showing off his mind's superiority to this old man, kind of like as someone even younger, you know. And so Shams Tabrizi, it's as if like this man is so enlightened. What he does is he takes this book out of Rumi's hand and throws it in the water. And Rumi gets up in shock and closes his eyes, and he sees how that knowledge is now destroyed. The ink is destroyed as it fell with the water, and so the science book, the knowledge has escaped him. Literally, it's as if he held knowledge in his hand and it got destroyed. And so in that moment, Rumi just looks at Shams and says, "Do you know what you have done? You have destroyed the newest sciences of our time. You have destroyed our future, pretty much." Shams looks at him, takes the book out. The book is completely dry as if it never fell in the water, gives it to Rumi, and says, "Knowledge that could be wiped with water is no knowledge at all." And he just leaves like a badass. And so that story, the significance of it is that if you are seeking to wanting to know something where it has a value of continuity. Because that whole YOLO culture is, it makes sense emotionally, but life has to have, you have to use this sophisticated evolutionary tool after billions of years that your eyes have opened in. You have one lifetime to truly comprehend what this mind is. This is an artwork by someone named Fashion. Fashion, this Persian artist who drew this conversation between Rumi and Shams, but not the one in the story, just their relationship, kind of mystical relationship, right? Hang in there, folks. Okay, there we go. This artwork kind of represents how, just like people can look at language in a book and see that as a reflection of truth, they can also look at people and personalities and mind phenomena and any sort of phenomena also as a reflection of truth. It has to do with the nature of self-inquiry. It has to do with how you interpret the sky of your world. Is it limitless or is it limited? Is unknown in the knowledge, or is the known in the unknown? Do you see that it's totally different ways of acknowledging life? When the known is in the unknown, which is the mystical position, it's as if you realize the unknown has outnumbered you. So many unknown phenomena could happen. So you have to, in some sense, keep a sort of alertness. You have to, again, the whole yin yang thing, you got to keep a sort of alertness to physical reality and wakefulness. You know, now I'm not talking to people. There's certain people who can in some sense experience a life in their dreams, and I'm telling you that life is um, again, you can play with clay as much as you want. The mind will constantly endlessly simulate reality until it becomes resolved, like kind of it finds a resolution to the soul, to this eternal bewildered soul that has to survive endlessly. It's like if you're an eternal being and you have to and survival is the meaning of life, it makes no sense. But if you're a temporary being, survival is the only meaning. How we paint the moment, how we paint ourselves, how we paint our worlds, and who holds the brush. That is where, in some sense, life is becomes a journey, and it's no longer just a story. The stories helped, like they come and go. Zen Master Dogen has this quote where he says, "To study Buddha's path, you must study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things." That means you first look at what's here. It has definition, shape, form, but you study it to a degree where you see it's dependent on a macrocosmic framework. So you no longer just see yourself. You see this how the world has in some sense become yourself. You see, art is a way out from the common into the uncommon. It is literally seeing where the depths of your effort and attention can lead. And eventually you kind of find yourself. The best movie I've kind of known that depicts this is like, I think, I don't know if the movie was called Attila or Genghis Khan, I don't know. But it was like this movie about like let's say Attila or whatever. Attila was kind of like in this prison, and he's in this prison at the end of this film, and he's waiting. And so this sage who suddenly got in a vision comes to Attila who's in the prison, in this public prison, and Attila's just sitting in some kind of well, like meditative fury, you know, silent fury, you know. And so as something happens, this holy man who's seen the vision of the future, he comes to him and says, "You're going to bring a storm. You're going to unleash a storm." And he says, "I need you to, when you unleash your storm, you shouldn't destroy the temple. When you literally come to conquer the city, you shouldn't destroy the temple, pretty much." And so what happens, in some sense, what happens is, guys, I'm gonna do something before I forget. Let's get a frame at least where these pictures are big. A couple seconds go by. Nice. Okay. Pretty much the story of mankind is how limited intelligence evolved towards limitless intelligence, and it continues. And the greatest outcome, what else can it be? People will live for themselves so many years until eventually they see there's something, yeah, there's humanity here, this science project that we can't just let go, and everybody, you know, runs into their artificial paradise, you know, until like the candlelight goes out. You know, it's like life is more valuable than that, and that's why it requires the most efficient technology to be acknowledged. And the most efficient resource, it's not something physical. It's not something in the periodic table that has the highest value. You know, what has the highest value is the innovative ability of every mind. It's as if, like, if you really thought about it, sure, like overpopulation, destructive and efficient societies design and all this, like societal programs, like, sure, like, okay, the world's going towards a weird kind of like technologically, as if human biology is maybe has to be too cautious about how much technology replaces reality, you know. It's as if the caveman never thought we had to wonder about the dangers of being lost in virtual realms, you know. If you consider a person's life and their whole intelligence to be a movement of a certain pattern that's going in accordance to certain dualities, certain cycles, so you begin to see a person is this engine of change, you know, this changing phenomena. So when you see a person as a changing phenomena, it becomes very hard to pinpoint them in a certain picture. So instantly, it's as if our intelligences are, as for the species, the human intelligence has become more valuable than words. So in some sense, all that you can do is just bless it with freedom. That means imagine how much smarter the world would work if all the governing society powers were like, holy shit, why are we keeping these poor people like in these conditions? Why not liberate society? Literally, it was this ancient notion of society. There were enlightened kings as much as there were fools, you know. And so, like, the notion of society was that it was meant to be the most beautiful place. The person couldn't wait to wake up and enter the incredible value that society was not limiting people's intelligence, was making it limitless, and not even in speaking about like kind of Elysium movie kind of immortal technology, you know. I feel like I need to find one more story to, fit this puzzle piece. there's um there's this story about um John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And there's this YouTube video that shows after Martin Luther King passed away, was assassinated, due to the unfortunate situation. It's John F. Kennedy went into, I don't remember exactly which uh, I don't know if it was Detroit or where the place was exactly, you know. But John F. Kennedy went into this like predominantly African American neighborhood, and when people were furious that it was like the assassin was a white person, and they had destroyed such like they had denied like Martin Luther King's greatness to kind of reach the years of man, fully. And so it's as if like in that moment it was like there was this kind of rage, and John F. Kennedy was like on a strangely kind of passionate for like nature, a man who cared for life, like actually. And he goes there and he gives this speech. And if I find the link, I'll put it on YouTube. And in that speech, he says a line where he uses it from the ancient Greeks, where it was to tame the savageness of man and make gentler the life of this world, right? And it's kind of it was a very profound moment, because you see we don't just live as bodies, we're living as minds, and minds have an incredible value when they open up the world. We need to have this kind of global tribal attitude where we would want the greatest ideas to find the global stage as soon as possible. What that means is like true knowledge at its epitome in an evolved society has a sort of incredible gladiator arena, but this gladiator arena is subjective. What that means is it's like a school of Athens, the next level school of Athens, where like the whole species, every person from anywhere can like their attention can come into that arena, and there comes a sort of conceptual warfare. So you see, it's as if when we realize we're minds don't have shapes. You can't put your mind on the table. You cannot see your mind in the mirror. You see, it's as if we are minds, and so these minds cannot be discriminated against. To be honest, you can't discriminate against consciousness. Even no person can think they are something when there's even the hard problem and hard and easy problems of consciousness and neurology. It's like some things we don't know. How can we have a reaction for? And so, anyways, guys. Hang in there, guys. I found the last picture. All right, finally. Okay, there we go. The journey itself is my home. You see, that's the wonder of life kind of directs your attention. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and mercy.